The evening was unusually quiet, the kind of stillness where every tiny sound seemed amplified. I was in bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to relax after a long day, when I heard a faint knock at my bedroom door. It wasn't loud or urgent, just a soft, hesitant tap. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't been expecting anyone. "Who is it?" I called out as I sat up. "It's me," came the reply, and the voice was unmistakable. It was my stepmom. We had always been on good terms, never close, but we got along well enough. She had married my dad a few years earlier, and while I respected her, we weren't the type of family to have deep, emotional conversations. So, hearing her voice outside my door late at night completely caught me off guard. I hesitated for a moment before getting up to open the door. There she was, standing in front of me, looking more uncertain than I had ever seen her. Her usual confident demeanor was replaced with a nervous energy that immediately made me uneasy. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "Oh, sure," I replied, stepping aside. She entered, her eyes scanning the room, as if searching for the right words. I could tell this wasn't just a casual visit. Something was on her mind. My mind raced. Was something wrong with Dad? Had I done something to upset her? The possibilities seemed endless, and none of them felt good. When she finally sat on the edge of my bed, she took a deep breath and looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, part nervous, part serious. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice barely a whisper. A chill ran down my spine. There was something in her tone that made me realize this wasn't going to be a typical question. What could she possibly need from me in the middle of the night? My mind was spinning, trying to brace for whatever came next. Then she asked something that completely threw me off guard. Something I never saw coming. "What is it?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling. She hesitated again, her hands nervously fiddling with the hem of her sweater. It was so unlike her to be this uneasy. She was always the one in control, the one keeping everything running smoothly at home. "I don't know how to say this," she started, her eyes avoiding mine. "But I need your help with something personal. It's about your father." My heart sank. Was Dad okay? Was there something wrong with their marriage? A dozen worst-case scenarios raced through my mind, each more troubling than the last. But instead of jumping to conclusions, I stayed quiet, letting her speak at her own pace. "He doesn't know I'm talking to you about this," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "And I don't want him to find out. Not yet." This only deepened my confusion. My dad was the most straightforward person I knew, honest to a fault, and always open about everything. What could she possibly need help with that she couldn't talk to him about? I could see how difficult this was for her. Her usually composed exterior had completely fallen apart. It was almost as if she didn't recognize herself in this moment. And that scared me more than anything she could have said. "Is he okay?" I blurted out, unable to hide my worry any longer. "Yes, he's fine," she quickly assured me, shaking her head. "It's not about his health or anything like that. It's complicated." The way she said complicated only added to my unease. It was as if she was trying to prepare me for something I wasn't going to like. "I've been holding this in for a while," she continued, her voice trembling. "I've been trying to figure out the right way to handle it. But the truth is, I can't do this on my own, and you're the only person I can trust with this." Her words hit me hard. Trust me with what? I thought. not sure whether to feel honored or terrified. Whatever this was, it was bigger than I had imagined. I sat down across from her, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, unsure if I was ready for the answer. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "I need you to help me decide what to do next," she said. But before she could say more, she stopped herself, as if she wasn't ready to reveal everything yet. There was something in her voice, and in the way she looked at me, that made this moment feel weighty, like I was about to be pulled into something far bigger than I could have imagined. My stepmom, the woman who had always seemed so composed, was now looking at me as though I was her only lifeline. "I can't say everything yet," she said after a long pause. "I need you to promise me something first." "Promise what?" I asked cautiously. "Promise you won't tell your dad. Not yet, at least. Until I figure out what I'm going to do." My stomach twisted. Whatever this was, it clearly involved my dad, and the thought of keeping something from him felt wrong. But the look on her face stopped me from refusing outright. She was pleading, silently begging me to agree. And I could see that whatever this was, it wasn't easy for her to bring up. "I don't know," I stammered. "I don't want to lie to him." "It's not lying," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "It's just keeping it quiet for now. Please, I don't have anyone else I can talk to about this." Reluctantly, I nodded, unsure if I was making the right choice, but feeling like I didn't have much of a choice. "Okay," I said softly. "I won't say anything for now." She let out a shaky breath, almost as if relieved. But the tension in the room didn't lighten. If anything, it seemed even heavier, as though the air itself was pressing down on us both. "There's something your dad hasn't told you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something from before. I married him." Her words sent a chill through me. What could she mean? My dad had never been a secretive person, or at least that's what I'd always believed. She hesitated again, glancing at the door, as though afraid someone might overhear. "I found something," she finally said. "Something I wasn't supposed to see." "What did you find?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She looked at me, her eyes full of guilt and fear. "A letter," she said. "And if it's true, it changes everything." I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. But my mind was spinning. A letter? What kind of letter could cause her to be this shaken? And why did she need me to be involved? The questions kept coming, but I wasn't anywhere near ready for the answers. "A letter?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. My stepmom nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she wrung them together. She looked so vulnerable, so different from the woman I thought I knew. "Yes," she said, glancing at the door again, as though expecting someone to walk in at any moment. "I wasn't supposed to find it. It was tucked away in one of his old boxes in the attic. I only went up there because I was looking for a photo album." Her voice trailed off as she shook her head. "I wish I'd never opened that box." I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "What did the letter say?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "It was from someone he used to know. A woman." The way she said it made my stomach twist. "What kind of letter could cause this much trouble?" I asked, cautiously, unsure if I really wanted to hear what she had to say. "It's personal," she replied, her voice lowering to a whisper. "It was written before we married, but it's about a child Your dad never mentioned to me. I froze, her words reverberating in my mind. A child? My dad had another child. My thoughts raced as I tried to process this. It couldn't be true, could it? My dad wasn't the type to hide something like that. At least I didn't think so. I don't know if it's true, she continued, her voice wavering slightly. But the letter had a name and an address. I don't know what to do with this, and I don't want to confront your dad until I'm sure. Her words hit me like a shockwave. The idea of my dad having a hidden child, someone I'd never even heard of, was almost too much to handle. But when I looked at my stepmom, I could see how much this was affecting her. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice shaky. She gazed at me, her eyes a mix of desperation and doubt. I need you to come with me to find out the truth, she said, her voice barely audible. I need to know if this letter is real, if this person exists. My chest tightened. The thought of delving into my dad's past, uncovering something that could change everything, felt overwhelming. But at the same time, I knew there was no turning back now. Whatever was in that letter was going to change all of our lives. I sat there in shock, her words hanging heavily in the air. Going with her to uncover the truth felt like an act of betrayal. But the urgency in her voice, the way her hands shook, told me she couldn't face this on her own. Okay, I finally said, though my voice felt distant. But if we do this, we have to be careful. If Dad finds out... I trailed off, unable to finish. She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. I know, she said. I just need to know what's real, if this person exists, if the letter is true. She paused, her voice faltering. I need to know what kind of life I'm living. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about uncovering a secret. It was about everything my dad and stepmom's relationship was built on. If this was true, it would shake the foundation of their marriage and our family. The next day, we set out for the address in the letter. It was in a quiet neighborhood, a couple of towns over, a place neither of us had been before. The drive was tense and silent, filled with unspoken fears. I could tell she was struggling with her own doubts, just as I was. What would we find? A stranger? A family? Or worse, undeniable proof that the letter wasn't a misunderstanding. When we arrived at the house, my heart pounded so loudly, it drowned out my thoughts. It was a modest home with a worn mailbox and a porch that had seen better days. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just sat there, staring at the house as if waiting for it to reveal its secrets. Finally, she broke the silence. I'll go to the door, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Wait here. I wanted to argue, to insist on going with her, but something in her tone stopped me. This was something she needed to do alone. I watched as she stepped out of the car, her shoulders tense, and walked up the porch steps. Just as she reached the door and raised her hand to knock, something unexpected happened. The door opened on its own, and a woman stood there, as though she had been expecting us. In her arms was a small child, no older than 2. My stepmom froze, her hand still hovering mid-air, her breath caught in her throat. The woman in the doorway looked equally startled. But there was something else in her expression, something almost knowing. She glanced at my stepmom, then at the car where I was sitting. Her grip on the child tightened, as though she was protecting him from some unseen danger. Or can I help you? The woman asked, cautiously. Her voice calm, but guarded. My stepmom hesitated. The words she'd likely rehearsed during the drive evaporated. She opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again, her composure unraveling. Finally, she managed, "I think you might know my husband." The woman's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her reaction. "Your husband?" she repeated, her tone neutral. "Yes," my stepmom said, her voice trembling. "His name is David. He—" She stopped, her gaze dropping to the child in the woman's arms. The little boy had the same dark brown eyes as my dad, the same slight dimple on his left cheek. It was undeniable. The woman sighed, shifting her weight as if bracing herself. "You should come inside," she said, stepping aside from the door. I watched as my stepmom hesitated for a moment before nodding and stepping into the house. My stomach churned as I imagined what was being said inside. I wanted to be there to hear the truth, but I felt frozen, unable to move. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the door opened and my stepmom emerged, her face pale and her hands trembling. I jumped out of the car and rushed to her. "What happened?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. "It's true," she whispered. "The boy is David's son, but there's more." My world seemed to shift beneath me. "What do you mean more?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She took a shaky breath, struggling to find the words. "The woman, she doesn't want money or anything from him," she said. "But she said David knows about the boy. He's known all along." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. My dad, the man I trusted without question, had been keeping this secret for years. Not just from my stepmom, but from me as well. And just when I thought the twists were over, my stepmom added, "And she said there's one more thing. Something David hasn't told either of us." I stood there, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "Something else?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My stepmom nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of anger, confusion, and sadness. "She wouldn't tell me what it was," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "She just said that David has been keeping more secrets about his past, and that if I wanted answers, I'd have to ask him myself." We drove home in silence, the air thick with unasked questions. I couldn't stop thinking about my dad, this man I thought I knew so well. The idea that he had not only hidden a child but possibly more secrets from us felt like a betrayal. I didn't know how to process it, but a small part of me held on to the hope that maybe there was some explanation, some piece of the puzzle that would make sense of it all. When we got home, my stepmom didn't wait. She went straight to the living room where my dad was sitting, reading the newspaper as if everything was normal. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. He looked up, startled by her tone, and then his eyes darted to me. He must have seen the tension on our faces, because his expression shifted to concern. "What's going on?" he asked cautiously. She didn't mince words. "I know about the letter. I know about the boy." The color drained from his face, and for a moment, he looked as if he might deny it. But then he sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I never wanted you to find out this way," he said quietly. His admission felt like a slap to the face. My stepmom's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her composure. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. his voice heavy with regret. I made mistakes in my past, and I didn't want them to hurt you or our family. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just an overwhelming sense of sadness and disappointment. In the days that followed, we worked through the fallout together. It wasn't easy, and trust had to be rebuilt. But in the end, it reminded us all that honesty is the foundation of any relationship. Secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of coming to light. And when they do, they can shake even the strongest bonds.